Army. Jim Fay calls that the helicopter parent syndrome, where you hover over your kid. Don't hover over your kids. Now, what if they're still late even after that? What we tend to do, especially on the secondary level, is if that consequence doesn't work, we make it more severe. So we say dumb things like, if you're late 10 times, you're suspended, which says to the kid, if you don't want to come, we're not going to let you come. That's why I marvel that we would ever do out-of-school suspension for truancy. You don't want to come, we won't let you in the door. Now, I can see in-school suspension for truancy because we get them 5.5 hours with uninterrupted time to make up any work they've missed and for them to be supervised. But not out-of-school suspension. So I'm certainly not going to say if you're late 10 times, you're out of here. What I would rather do is bore the kid with the consequence. Anytime after the 4th time the kid is late, parents are notified, and they owe us time to come up with a better plan. One of two things are going to happen. One, they'll get very good at writing plans. Or two, they'll get very good at showing up on time. If you look at that, they don't get good at being late that way. We put the problem back where it belongs and ask the kid to help solve it. Second rule, be prepared. They get harder, by the way. Getting them there is one thing. Now they got to bring everything they're supposed to have. Special ed teachers. I'm a special ed teacher. My degrees are in LD, ED, MR. I used to say I was the emotionally disturbed teacher, and I meant that in more ways than one on some days. We as special ed teachers are notorious rescuers. Our kids can't be late. We pick them up. They can't forget stuff. We bring it for them. We hover over them. Kid forgets a pencil. We give it to them. But we mini-lecture. What do I have to do? Tie this around your neck. This is the last time I'm loaning you a pencil. You know you're supposed to bring a pencil. Your brother never forgot his pencil. But we loan it to them. Or we punish them. You forgot your pencil. Tough cookie, sit. Now I have a real problem with that because that will not bounce off my second philosophical tenet. I will not treat a child in a way I myself would not want to be treated. Think about it. You're all on faculty with me. One day I'm handing out pay vouchers. One of you forgot a pencil. Tough cookie, no pay. Think about it. You wouldn't want me to do that to you. Why would you do it to a kid? Besides, you'd probably say, you treat me like a kid. What right do we have to treat kids in a way we ourselves would not want to be treated? They cannot make the same wise decisions you and I can make. That comes with age, wisdom, and experience, hopefully. But they are entitled to the same dignity and worth that you and I are entitled to. So I'm not going to rescue the kid, but I'm also not going to punish them. What I want to do is discipline them. Show them what they've done wrong, give them ownership of the problem, give them ways to solve it, and most importantly, leave their dignity intact. Kid comes up and says, my mom forgot to put my pencil in my backpack. I say, oh darn, how are you going to handle that? I invite them first to solve it. Sometimes they come up with great answers. Most of the time they do. If we invite them to think, sometimes they don't. You say, I got junior high age kids who don't know how to think. You're right. There are some junior high age kids who don't know how to think. Their parents are still laying their clothes out so the alligators match in the morning. You know, they haven't had to think for themselves. But the little kid comes up and I ask him to come up with a way to solve it. My mom forgot to put my pencil in my backpack. How are you going to solve it? I invite them first to think for themselves. If they cannot come up with a way, I give them options. Once in a while, I will give a kid a solution. But solutions are what to think, so I don't do that very often. There's a time for a solution. You're in the middle of a timed exam. Kid breaks his pencil lead. You don't say, how are you going to solve that? You hand them a pencil. But the rest of the time, I like to give kids options, which are how to think. I say, kid, I know of at least 4 ways you can handle that. 1, you could borrow from a friend. 2, you could write with a crayon. 3, you could buy one from me. Now, there is one problem. There's a considerable markup. I have to make a living somehow, and in our state it is rather difficult on teacher salaries. Or 4, you could borrow one from me with some collateral. Little kids, I take a left shoe. Always get my pencil back before break. Older kids, meal ticket. Always get my pencil back before lunch. Pretty soon the kids say, ain't borrowing from that lady, it's too tough, and they hit their friends up. Can I borrow a pencil? And the kid says, car keys, please. You know, the kids catch on to the routine as well. So you give them ways. Now with each rule, you have to establish a backbone to help kids function in that rule. And one of the ways you can help establish a backbone with remembering things is with lists. My high school kids had lists in their lockers. No guarantee they're going to read them, but you have a better chance of the kid reading a list if there's one there to read. My resource kids had lists in their desks and in their lockers, and some on their persons. And I didn't say, don't forget, remember. I said, check your list. My own children at home, 3 hooks for their backpacks, 3 lists. Each kid writes out their own list. Top of the 15-year-old's list is glasses. She's been wearing glasses since she was 4.5. My job as a mother to make sure she owns a pair. Her job to make sure she wears them, not mine. And when they were younger, Monday Girl Scout uniform, Tuesday gym sneakers, Wednesday library books. And I remember my daughter going up to her list on a Monday morning in a brand new outfit, all ready to wear to school, and looking at the list and going, Scout uniform. She has two choices. She can go up and change to that uniform or go to school without it. Choice is hers, not her mother's. I long ago gave up worrying about what people are going to think if Colarosa's daughter shows up with a Scout uniform or without a Scout uniform. I mean, I got another kid in a layered look. Scout uniform, quite frankly, is the least of my worries. And quite frankly, layered look doesn't even bother me a whole lot. I had a fantastic opportunity before I had my own children. When I was very young and naive, my husband and I took in juvenile delinquents, and I taught juvenile delinquents. And when you've dealt with sexual promiscuity, drug abuse, and attempted suicide, believe me, layered look isn't going to bother you a whole lot. And I believe what Don Shaw says. Don is what we call the Sex and Sin Director in Jefferson County. That's the Health Ed Director. He says if you let kids make most of their own decisions, decisions that are not life-threatening or morally threatening decisions, before they reach puberty, they rarely take the quantum leaps in rebellion in the teen years because it's hard to rebel against your own decision. And I believe that. We've got to let our kids make decisions and solve their own problems and live with the consequences. You help them with lists. Now, home scene. As parents, many of us are going to get a phone call, but let's say this is the fourth phone call. Mom, I forgot my gym uniform. Bless the parent who says, oh darn. I see it right here on the counter. It's going to be a tough day for you. I know you can handle it. Good luck, goodbye. Do you know what we do? We run that uniform down to the kid. Now, we mini-lecture the kid when we get there. What after you tie this around your neck? This is the last time I'm bringing this gym uniform. Do you know what kind of time it took out of my day to get this uniform? Here you go. Brother never forgot his gym uniform. But we bring it to him. Do you know it is not life-threatening in most schools to forget a gym uniform? It is painful, but it is not life-threatening. You say, wait a minute. You mean I can't ever bring a gym uniform or a band instrument or a term paper that my kid worked on all night long and left on the counter? Brick wall says, never, never, never let them feel the pain. Jellyfish says, all the time. In fact, I'll get it there before he even realizes he's missing it. You've seen parents like that. I mean, they get there with the lunch pail before the bus gets there. They say, my son forgot his lunch. And then you hand it to the kid and he looks at it like, huh? You know. Backbone says, once in a while you can. Once in a while, out of kindness and caring and loving, you can help your kid out. You treat him the way you'd want to be treated. Now, I personally won't bring a gym uniform. I believe if my children have to experience a real-world consequence, not punishment, but a real-world consequence for forgetting their gym uniform, the chances of them remembering it the next time is greatly increased. And I'm not talking real-world consequence, which in the end is punishment, where you say you got to write 550 times, I will not forget my gym uniform. If any of you have kids do anything that resembles that, I will not forget my gym uniform 550 times, I have an assignment for you. I want you to go home and tell, don't ask. We're not asking kids, we're telling them. Tell your spouse to write, I love you 1,000 times. If it affects your love life in a positive way, then you may continue to have students write, I will not forget my gym uniform. If it does not, do not. But I have brought things to school. One day my oldest called. She said, Mom, would you bring my backpack? I said, Anna, what's in that backpack you can't live without? I had a lot of things to do that day. And she started to sob. She said, my Valentine's. Hey, it was second grade Valentine's Day. I brought it. There's a time you do that. Have you ever locked yourself out of the car, watched yourself do it? I have. I'm on my way to a workshop. I called my husband. I said, hon, the car's running, keys are in it. I'm not. I need your help. But you know what my husband said? He said, Barb, I'll be right there. That's what I needed to hear. Barb, I'll be right there. I didn't need, that's a bummer, I know you can handle it. But I know my husband well enough to know that if I lock myself out on a fairly regular basis, I might hear, that's a bummer, I know you can handle it, because it's about time I learned to handle it. You see, there are times with the backbone where you can bend in a kind, caring, loving way, but you're not rescuing the kid. But you help them with lists. If a kid once in a while forgets stuff, right away the kid knows he's got to solve it. The pain and uncomfortableness only goes away when he solved it, so you don't have to impose another consequence on it. It's the kid who consistently forgets stuff is the kid you hook and say, kid, you have a problem. I want a written plan. You say, oh no, not another written plan. I do not know how kids can solve problems without plans. You say, I got kids who write plans, they don't follow through. Well, kids are people too. I'll bet some of you have paid people to help you quit smoking, quit drinking, or lose weight. And you still have the problem. Even paying doesn't do it. But you have a better chance at solving it if you have a plan. So you say, kid, you got a problem, what's your plan? Rule 3, do your assignments. It's probably the most difficult rule of all. Getting them there with everything they need is a piece of cake compared to getting them to do the work they're supposed to do. But again, as with the other two rules, you have to establish a backbone that kid can function in with that rule. And one of the things I think we have to do is we have to be sure what we gave kids they can do. And you say, well, we do that. I'm not so sure we do that. I watched 6 ninth grade boys flunk remedial reading. I went up to the remedial reading teacher. I said, they beat you up or not show up? She said, what? I said, how else can you flunk remedial reading? Short of beating a teacher up or not showing up. She said, oh, those boys. Do you know they're only reading on the 2nd grade level? Everybody else is at least on the 4th. You know what part of town they come from. We get no parental cooperation whatsoever, and the kids have a lousy attitude. What else could I do besides flunk them? I said, well, let me tell you, there's a lot you could do, because you get them back next term as angry 2nd grade readers. They're harder to teach. If a kid has to, because of your guidelines in your district, or our state laws, or in Canada, our provincial laws, if it says a kid has to take that class, then I believe we have an obligation to that kid to set it up so the kid can be successful. Not will, that's their choice, but can be. Does that mean totally individualizing for 30 kids all day, every day? I think whoever said you could totally individualize for 30 kids all day, every day has yet to teach 30 kids all day, every day. You can't do it, but you can set it up so every kid can be successful. I'd like you to think about it. You're a school teacher, and I'm going to put you in a position you could not produce in. Let's say you love teaching 3rd grade. And some of you are probably dying 1,000 deaths, say never, never, never. But pretend you love 3rd grade. You hate 12th grade science. Wouldn't want to touch it. So I come in and say, I'm your new principal. You're no longer our 3rd grade teacher. You're going to be our 12th grade science teacher. Now, I want you to show up on time, be prepared, do your assignments. I want you to come in motivated, full of pizzazz. Now, there is one problem. We can't pay you. I mean, you're one of the worst teachers we ever had, and we just thought you'd do less damage in the 12th grade science class than you're doing to that 3rd grade class. We can't pay you. You're no longer on tenure. We can't keep anybody that poor on tenure. And you may have to repeat this year when you do go back on the pay scale. But I'll tell you what I will do. Every day I'll come in, we'll go over all the things you're doing wrong. Once a week we'll write it up. Once a term we'll put it in your permanent record down in the main office. Think about it. First of all, would you bother to show up for that job? No, you go find another job. Well, let's say you couldn't find another job. So you did come back. Think of the kind of attitude you'd have. You'd be a little unmotivated, a little disinterested, a little hostile. You might take a few sick days when you really weren't sick. And think of how you would respond to me every day when I sat down and went over all the things you're doing wrong and then posted it in your permanent record. There's a big difference between you and a grade 7 student. You could get another job, and you would get another job under those circumstances. That grade 7 student can't, by law, has to be here. But how many grade 7 students have we said that same thing to? Welcome to grade 7. We want you to show up on time, be prepared, do your assignments. We want you to come in motivated, full of pizzazz. Now there is one problem, kid. You're stupid. You see, we've socially promoted you through the elementary years, so you can't read that 7th grade reader. You can't do the 7th grade language arts. Certainly can't do the 7th grade math, so you might not get credit for this year. In fact, you may have to repeat this year. But I tell you what I will do. Every day I'll come in, we'll go over all the things you're doing wrong. Once a week we'll write it up. Once a term we'll put it in a permanent record called a report card and send it home to your folks. And we say, gee, I wonder why he's unmotivated. Why is he disinterested? Why is he so hostile? Why is he ditching school? You would too, if every day you were put in a position you could not produce in. If a kid has to be in your classroom, you have an obligation to set it up so that kid can be successful. Does that mean totally individualizing for 30 kids all day, every day? I think whoever said you could totally individualize for 30 kids all day, every day has yet to teach 30 kids all day, every day. You can't do it, but you can set it up so every kid can be successful. I would like to be able to walk into any of your classrooms 1 week from today. Ask any kid, kindergarten through grade 12, trainably handicapped through gifted, 3 questions, and know that every single kid in your schools could answer all 3 questions. Where am I at? Where am I going? And what do I need to do to get there? And that means you tell a grade 6 student who's reading at a 3.2 reading level that they're reading at a 3.2 reading level. You are not letting the cat out of any bag. The buzzards know the name of their reading group no matter what the computer punch-out card calls them. They know where they fit. We might as well tell them this is where you're at, where you're going, and what you need to do to get there. The next thing we need to do, and again, these are all things we need to do to establish a backbone for that rule, is we have to teach with pizzazz. I swear there are some teachers you have to wake up to pay. And that shouldn't be happening. But those are the ones that were writing all those awful reports about and blaming on every one of us in our profession. We have to show up on time, be prepared, do our assignments. Good teachers wing it once in a while, but you're not winging it every day. We got to be alive in that classroom. Now, it's real hard to be alive, junior high resource room. Can'ts, won'ts, ain't going to do it. So they're all sitting there and they're not in the front row. I used to walk into my resource room and I'd say, how many of you kids know how to read? And they looked at me like, didn't you see the title of this class? I said, how many of you kids would like to learn to read? It got worse. They snickered at me. And I said, I don't believe you don't know how to read. And I held up a stack of signs I knew they knew. Video Arcade, Donkey Kong, Insert Quarter, Free, Food, McDonald's, Arby's, Coke, Marijuana. You know what? They read every one of them. I said, you do too know how to read. You've just been very selective. We're going to expand that in this room. And I started reading to them. I think one of the finest ways to hook kids on learning is to hook them on books. But that means we got to read every day with pizzazz in that classroom. Even if it's the fourth time that day you read that story. You got to read it with pizzazz. And I'd start reading a story, and I like to start with one called Nyannuki, written by a school teacher, about the girl who was kidnapped with Sacagawea and escaped. It's a historical novel, but based on a true story of the young girl who was captured with Sacagawea and then escaped. And we know she exists because in Lewis and Clark's annals, they have a note about her when Sacagawea went back to the village. She found a woman that she had long given up as dead, and it was Nyannuki. It's a fascinating story. I can read that to kindergarten kids. I can read it to high school kids. But junior high kids sit there at first, totally unmotivated, disinterested. But pretty soon, that's such an exciting story that the kids start looking around, because you need this in junior high, permission to get excited. Then they're finally hooked. And when they're hooked, I close the book, and they go, what? I say, you want the ending? It's on my desk. They're fighting day one over a book, not bad in remedial reading. Most kids come to kindergarten as candles with huge flames. Some of those kids, by the time you and I see them in junior high, are candles with black wicks. But we have to believe our teaching pizzazz can light that back up again, and I believe it can. Part of that pizzazz is a personal bias of mine. You do not have to buy it, just irritate about it. It's a teacher dress code. I believe more than ever today, you and I must give witness to what we believe our profession is, and that it is one of the finest. And I'm not talking three-piece suit for the kindergarten teacher or tuxedo for the PE teacher. I'm saying whatever is your own personal best, you wear it. Not so people think you look nice. How you look in your clothes, quite frankly, is an accident of genetics, birth, diet, exercise, and age. Think about it. But you wear your best to say to your students, you're important enough for me to dress for you. Now, I'm not talking a lot of clothes. In fact, the motto my husband and I try to live by is the motto for the Center for Justice and Peace, and that is to live simply so others may simply live. I don't think you have to have a lot of clothes. When I first started teaching in New Mexico, I had 4 outfits. The kids used to place bets on what I'd wear the 5th day, you know? And once in a while, I'd wear my one and only 3-piece suit, and the kids say, where are you going? I said, no place. Why are you dressed? For you. I mean, why did we dress? For the superintendent? No, you dress for the kids. If you're tenured, why bother, you know? You dress for the kids. Those of you in junior, senior high are doing it for another reason. Elementary teachers and parents play a very important parenting role in a kid's life. Kids even call you mom, dad, and grandma in school. But once your own children or your students reach puberty, you must move out of that role into a mentorship. You become their model and their guide. Guide them well in the teen years. In adulthood, you can become their good friend. Some of you are not yet a friend of your own parents. They haven't quit parenting you yet. You have to move out of that role into a mentorship. So those of us in the secondary level, we dress to mentor our kids, to model and guide for them. Part of teacher pizzazz is not always wearing your best. Part of it's getting into school spirit. You have school color day, wear the school colors. You have backwards day, wear your clothes backwards. School isn't something you're doing to kids. It's a very important community of which you and I are very important members. Some of you know my background. When I first started teaching, I wasn't in New Mexico. When I first started teaching, I had one outfit, though. I was a nun. Obviously, I'm not now with a husband and 3 kids, but I was once. And it was in the old days when you wore a coif, gimp, and 3 English yards. Made no problem about what you wore every day. You had the same outfit on every day. But when I left the order, I left with 4 white nightgowns and 1 black bathrobe. And every year since on Halloween, I wear red shoes from the Wizard of Oz, my black robe, and a witch's hat. My preschool EMR children loved it. My junior high resource kids were a bit taken back. My university students thought it rather strange. And invited their friends in to my methods course to meet this nutty instructor who not only wore a Halloween costume, but invited the students to do likewise. See, that's part of pizzazz. I think we have to teach with pizzazz. The next thing I believe we have to do to get kids to do their work is let them know what'll happen if they get their work done, what'll happen if they don't get their work done. I'm going to take an elementary scene here, and then we'll move up to a secondary. We do an interesting thing. We say, kids, you need to get your math done. If you don't get it done, you can't go out to play. Or we say, more positively, if you don't get your math done, you get to stay in. I used to say that. I was taught that in methods courses. If you don't get your math done, you get to stay in. I was so proud I didn't say you can't go out. And I'm sorry I ever said that. And I quit saying it after a while when I started to bounce that off my second philosophical tenet. I won't treat a kid in a way I myself would not want to be treated. Guess who else didn't get a break if the kid didn't get a break? I don't believe breaks are something you earn, they're something you need. And you know the kid who needs it the most is the kid who never gets a break. That little kid who dances through his math, it's no problem for him. He even has time at the computer center. We send him out for break. The other little kid's having a terrible time getting his math done, and we say, you got to stay in. He needs a break. Breaks aren't something you earn, they're something you need. So I'm not going to say, if you don't get your math done, you can't go out. Or you don't get your math done, you get to stay in. Neither of those. I really get upset with teachers who say, if you don't get your math done, you can't go to lunch. Some of those kids, that's their first meal. Some their only meal. And some their only hot meal. I am not going to hold a basic body need over a kid to force them to do work. That is the ultimate in control. I know my kids are well fed at home. I do not know that about any of my students. And I really get upset with teachers who say, if you don't get your math done, you can't go to art. As if art, music, and PE were extra and special. Art, music, and PE are not extra and special. Art, music, and PE are critical to right brain development, which is critical to critical thinking, which is critical to problem solving. I just dare one art teacher just want to say, you don't get your art done, you can't go to math, and see if there's no problem in your building. Think about it. The arts are critical. And if you in your district are running the risk of the arts, and I'm including industrial arts, home economics, and drama here, if you're in the risk of being cut budget-wise in the arts, I would recommend you go to your board meetings and remind the trustees that no archaeologist has yet to dig up a math ditto sheet. It doesn't happen that way. They dig up the arts, and the arts are critical to our human development. You say, well, can't keep them from break, can't keep them from lunch, can't keep them from art. What am I going to keep them from? You don't keep them from anything. What I would recommend you do on the elementary level is the last 20 minutes of your day be set aside as make-up time. And that's for any kid who's slow or chooses to be slow. And that's two different characters. A kid who just doesn't understand. Have you ever taught a fantastic lesson and it passed a couple of kids by? It's like Charlie Brown and Linus. Linus said, Charlie Brown, what'd you do in school today? Charlie Brown said, well, the teacher taught us the 13 colonies. Linus said, what are they? Charlie Brown looked at him and said, I said she taught them. I didn't say I learned them. There's a difference. A kid who's slow chooses to be slow. A kid who just doesn't understand. A kid who's been home with the flu or pulled for testing knows the last 20 minutes of the day is make-up time. Now, what do you do with kids who are done? You don't give them free time. I don't know of any school board that would or should approve of free time in the last 20 minutes of the day. I get real upset in special ed when we say, if you work real hard for 4 days, we'll give you the 5th day off. The last kids in school who need the 5th day off are kids who are behind. And if we do that, we end up giving them almost 2 working months off of school. They need 2 more, not 2 less. No, what you give them instead is the gift of reading, because I believe, again, you cannot give them enough of that. You give them the gift of reading. They're allowed to read